It's rather contextual. Yes, it depends with most decision makers. Who are the decision makers? That's the biggest question. Most government decisions, do they come out of the parliament or do they come out of the government? But my experience has seen that most policies are coming out of the ministries, where there's little capacity building activities taking place, because most international development partners are concentrating on the parliament, of which the parliament is politicians who are on short term. They can come and go, but within ministries there are key staff members there who work to build, who are there for a long term, and in the process we are building capacities which are on a long term basis. Yes, yeah.
Arrogant. But I think that's partly our fault as intermediaries, because we need to understand the mandate of policymakers, which is very different from the mandate of researchers, and as communicators we need to understand how to communicate differently to different audiences. So I think it's us that we need to, as intermediaries, that we need to work on, build our capacities more and have more confidence and build credibility to talk to policymakers in the manner that they would understand in the time that they would think is crucial to the process.
I think about 4 information literacy programs for 4 different categories: research scientists, assembly women, journalists, and NGO workers, and all of that. And having facilitated all of these sessions on information literacy, the outcome of it, the response I get, the feedback I get, I think that they are not information literate. I think so. I think that the people have information. The fact that you have information doesn't make you, an information literate. Yeah. The fact that you have information doesn't put you there. If you have the information, you need the skills to be able to even access the information, the skills to analyze that information. You need some skills to be able to put to use that information. And I don't think that just having access to the information alone is enough, and that makes you information literate. We need some education, some capacity building, some awareness creation around information literacy, and yeah, that is the point. After we've built all of these skills, that we can see them call themselves information literate.
Would you say?
Okay, a good number are, but then they might be very busy doing other things related to their national priorities, and they may not be too much around information and knowledge matters.
No, decision makers, I don't think they're information literate, and I think that's why we come in as knowledge brokers, to actually bring that information to their attention. Well, I think that's also a relative question, being decision maker and having knowledge of that information. If I could talk about, for example, Ministry of Agriculture in Kenya, I mean, the person who actually makes the decision would be the minister, but the person who has a lot of information would be the permanent secretary. So in that case, I would say the permanent secretary feeds the minister the information. So that means sometimes they are, but and at other times I don't think that they are really information literate. So that's why
policymakers or decision makers generally, I mean, across the board. Across the board. Not as information literate as we as a knowledge management organization would like them to be. I think, going to a website and using a website and being able to navigate a website, does require a certain amount of skill, and I'm not sure if everybody is as familiar with working on online platforms as they should be, or we would hope they would be.
Have you got experience of interacting with decision makers and to kind of know more what their information literacy skills are like? Or
No. So that's why it's been quite interesting in this meeting to be able to see the other side of people who are trying to who are implementing training in information literacy to find out where people are actually at, and that those would be our users. So it'd be quite interesting to see.
Decision make. From my understanding, my background in Zambia, I'm a Zambian. Decision makers usually, if we're looking at maybe the ministers, those are political people. Usually, some are literate, some are not. But the support staff, i.e., the permanent secretaries, the civil servants, they might have mostly PhDs. I mean, it's amazing in Africa, papers are very, very important. You find there are lots of PhDs doing also. But whether that is deliberate for them not to use information because they've done those degrees, or it's just lack of knowledge of how to do that, that's something that I can't answer. But there should be something that makes them not be information literate. And if we know that, then probably we can apply the right intervention.
Well, I can't really tell, to be honest. What I say, I'm working most of the time with researchers, and they are not in direct contact with politicians, maybe with policymakers. My impression, but it's maybe not more than an impression, there's a role to play for journalists to translate research into practical, consumable information. Like the example in data, when you have to read tables, it's much more difficult than to read an infographic. If you transpose it to, if you want to read scientific literature, you have to read 20 pages. While you as a politician, you want your information in a one-pager or a two-pager, and maybe in different language with less nuance. So there's a challenge. There's a challenge. So computer of information illiterate, I wouldn't say that. Maybe the information that's available to them may not be enough.
Yes, because yes, in that the systems which are on the ground in terms of coming up with policy decision, at least I can say a process which I've been involved in my country has stakeholder consultations. If it requires research information, you have to bring in research information, because then the people who prepare the information have to take care of all those things. If you are changing a policy, the previous policy has to be reviewed. You say what worked and what didn't work. Then you propose what should be the way forward. So then within ministries, that is presented to the ministers, the hierarchy, in order to understand what worked and what didn't work before you come up with a new process. And even if when you draft the policy, it has to go back to the stakeholders in order for them to comment and all. So the process is really lengthy. And the question which I encountered, they were asking how consultative can you be? How do you gauge enough consultation? Because sometimes you have to end somewhere, because it's a huge cost at the same time. So for me, I feel the policymakers are knowledgeable, and they are having information. Depends also the people who prepare this information. If they do enough research, then they should be well informed, and they are well informed. And a lot of them also do their own reading, so you can face tough questions on why you are deciding on this and not that, because they've already done their own research. So it depends, I guess, from where you're standing.